Hi, this is Crafting with Kathy with an Aussie Christmas flair. Today we're working with the gum leaf wreath and I'm going to be creating a soft smooshy metallic background for it and then doing some hand painting and shading. So it's going to be lots of fun. So the stamps we're using are from the Eclectic Images range. It's the gum leaf wreath and I'll also bring in some wattle, which makes a great border stamp. Even if we're looking for a Christmassy theme, anywhere in Australia there is always wattles, so it's a lovely one to be able to add in. The colours that I'm going to be working with, I've chosen some nice very Aussie green colours from the Catherine Pooler range, the green tea and the eucalyptus particularly, but also teaming a little bit of one of the newer colours in the Spa collection, the lemongrass, and of course a bit of Versamark because we're starting off, we're going to emboss in some gold. This is me thinking, ooh, copper would work well with this, but no, I've already chosen gold. Let's stick with gold. Okay, so I've already got my stamps on their blocks. With the gum leaf wreath, the saying and which is love, peace, joy, is separate to the wreath. So you can use the wreath with things like the little script season's greetings or script Merry Christmas, or you could even calligraphy someone's name in there if you wanted to. And it also does mean that the love, peace, joy can be used with other stamps as well. I usually try and make the stamps that you can use them in different ways so that you're not limited with a stamp only doing one thing. So anyway, so I'll stamp first the love, peace, joy in the middle and then we'll pop the wreath around it. So let's ink up with our Versamark. Just checking before I actually start inking, let's make sure I've got my lid off my gold powder and my bit of scrap standing by, and we'll give the card a bit of a wipe with our anti-static pad. Okay, now we're ready to go. So let's ink up again, love, peace, joy. Stamp that in the middle of the card. And you could very quickly stamp the wreath around it, but I'm not going to take the chance of that while you're watching. So I will actually put some powder on these bits. Tap on the back, just coming back over to the work area. I won't heat it yet though, I'll keep going with the next stamp, which is the wreath. So it's a lovely Christmas wreath, but it's made up of little gum leaves and sprigs of wattle. So let's position that over our text so it sort of wraps around it. You can't stamp them both together because the stamps have to have a little bit wider area of polymer as their backing. That means that even though they do fit together, I'll show you in a minute. Let's get the embossing powder on this. Tap it down, make sure it's covered everywhere. Good tap on the back. And there we've got our design. And I don't think we've got any little bits that we don't want. Now, as I was saying with the two stamps together, if we're going to try and put them on the same block, we would actually run into problems because of this backing area is bigger than the stamp. So you try and fit it in there and it doesn't quite smoosh in. So that's why I needed to stamp them separately. But it also means that if we wanted to, we could stamp and emboss the greeting and then with the wreath just have that done in a soft green or a brown or something. So it does mean that you've got the freedom to actually do it in different ways. Now let's just pop our embossing powder back in the jar before we start doing any heating and pop the lid on. Now just get my heat gun warmed up a bit. I'm just heating the back a bit just as I'm warming the heat gun up. And then we start making magic. So once it starts to go smooth, that's when you move on to the next bit. Okay, I'm just going to hold it up to the light and make sure it's shiny everywhere. Terrific. Okay, now to make our background, we're going to just use our craft mat. Now this technique works well with the Catherine Pooler inks, also works fabulously with all your distress and your distress oxides. So I'm just going to pop a bit of colour down. I'm questioning whether I want to put the darker colour on when I know I want to use that. No, I think I'll leave the background just really light. Now I happen to have some metallic colours left over from a previous card on my block here. So I'm just going to flick that Zinnia into there as well. And we might actually pick up some Sunflower Sparkle and put that in too. So just pick up a few bits and just drop it onto the mat there. Now we get a water bottle and give that a spritz. Just shielding a bit so I don't spray everywhere. Okay, so everything's beading up nicely. And I'm going to give my card a bit of a spritz as well, which is going to help the colours blend on that rather than grabbing. And then we're just going to just lay it down and just smoosh until we get good coverage. We don't need to cover the whole card. It's okay if we end up with a few bits of white. I've got some paper towel standing by. I don't want this too strong, so I'm just going to take a few bits back, but then I'm going to smoosh it again. So you can keep smooshing until you've got it where you want it. Now I quite like having a few runs of colour in there. That's going to be really nice. Just give it a little bit of character. Now I think I want a bit more of the green in the middle, so let's smoosh. Ah, that's beautiful. How much can I keep smooshing without wrecking it? This is me looking at Matthew, knowing that that would bring a smile to his face because he knows that I just have trouble stopping. I love that. Stopping there. Okay, so now I'm just I could easily create another couple of backgrounds with what I've got on my mat here. I can't stop and do that because we're doing a demo, but if I was making cards myself, I'd make another 2 or 3 backgrounds out of that before I move on. Particularly if you're doing your Christmas cards, so you're wanting to create multiple cards, if you've created a bit of a background wash like that, do several of your cards at once and speed up your card making. And leave that, just stop playing, just leave it there. Okay, but I will need to heat set it a little bit so that we can move on. Otherwise, it's going to, it's wet. So if I don't dry it off a bit, it's just going to smoosh with all our other colours that we're adding. So let's just give that a bit of a dry. Now when I'm drying with the heat gun, I don't hold it steady like when I'm embossing, I keep it moving. For 2 reasons. The air movement is going to help with the drying, but also it means I'm not overheating that embossed area. Because if we overheat it, it's going to just flatten back down again and we'll lose that beautiful shine. Okay, and while that's still doing a bit of drying, we're going to just make a palette with one of our acrylic blocks, put some of the Eucalyptus on, which is the deeper green, and a little bit of green tea. Actually, I lie. I think Eucalyptus, because actually I'm just looking at the size of the gum leaves, because they're so little, I think just one colour is going to be plenty. Now let's just give it a little bit of a dab, make sure that we've got all those blobs of water off. If we wanted to, we could make this background more splashy by actually splashing some water on there, and those colours would react and lift off again. But I'm happy with how that's looking because I know I've got in mind where this card's going to go to. So let's just, I'm just going to give the back a little bit of a heat. We're still not quite dry. This is one that I definitely should have done a prepared background earlier one. Sorry about this. Okay. So now using my water brush, and because I'm looking at a very small area there to colour in, I'm going to go with my very fine water brush. And I'll just bring up my scrap paper and put that underneath so that I've got somewhere to wipe my brush off if I need to get rid of water. I could have a bit of paper towel next to me as well, that would work. So to start with, what we're going to do is just pick up some of this lovely dark green and just start painting our little gum leaves. Now if I'm going to do a little bit of shading, I need to imagine where a light source might be coming from. So if I do a little bit of, imagine my light source is at the top right corner, it means that my darker bits of my leaves and any shadowing that I do are going to be away from that side. So I can put my colour on and then just use my brush just to move it away from one area and into another area. So we end up with, even though we're only using one colour, we're still ending up with a little bit of a graduation from light to dark. So this leaf here is going to be light. If our light's coming from here, the lightest point is going to be there. So let's start where we want the darkest point, shade up. If we need to, move a little bit of colour away. If we want a little bit more depth, let's add just a little bit more into that area. I can just wipe my brush clean on my scrap paper and then just go over it lightly to blend out the colours. So in this way, I'm glad now that I didn't use the eucalyptus in the background because it would have made the leaves stand out less. This way they're going to stand out because they're quite a bit darker than our backing colour. Let's just drag that up and push back a little bit. Now we're working on the Cottonblend cardstock here, just the 210 GSM, but it does mean that I can do some blending without the card balling up or pilling on me. Clean that and just do a little bit of a swizzle there. I want that top bit being quite light because this is where our light source is. So darker on one side. Because this is if I was working on a larger area, I could actually put the ink on and then as I drag it out, it's going to naturally get softer. But because I'm working on such a small spot, I'm really needing to use the clean brush to move a bit of colour away to create the highlights. Now this little one's tucked in underneath another leaf, so we might make that one quite dark. Whereas this one on top, so I'm still imagining my light sources here. So the lightest part of the petal is going to be this part, leaf, not a petal. So you can see we're starting to get just that little bit of 3Dness to the leaves by adding, by focusing on whether we're having a lighter or darker area. And if there's a little bit of mottling of the background colour on the leaves, that's fine. Mostly it'll be covered up because we're going over it with a darker colour. But leaves are quite patchy. So if you get a little bit of mottliness showing through, that's all fine. It just makes it look more natural. So as I'm working around, I'm continually checking back to if the light source is here, where's it going to hit? And that will be my lightest area of my leaf. But if we have one that's hiding in behind other leaves, it can stay a little bit darker. And if you need to, as you're doing your leaf, so I've got the point of the brush pressed up against the embossing. If I want the other side dark as well, turn the card around so you can get that point of the brush right up against your embossing. It just helps to save you going outside the edges. Again, we've got another one here that's tucked in underneath. So with my card that way, I can do this side of it. Turn my card around and I can get that point of the brush right up to my edge. This one will drag out a bit and then push the ink back a bit. Now here we've got one where it's shadowed underneath, but it's actually on the brighter side. So I'm still going, even though it's an underneath leaf, I'm still going to give it the highlight. It is a lovely thing, watercolouring. And this is the sort of card where you could actually, as I said, you could create your backgrounds all in one go, making the most of your colours. You'd have to stop after 3 or 4 cards, you'd probably stop and redo the backing, all the colours on your craft mat, because they'd start to muddy in together. So after you've done a few backgrounds, you'd stop, wipe it off and put some more inks on. But you could create a whole lot of backgrounds, and then once they're dry, another night, come back in and do your embossing, and then sit down in front of a movie and do all your colouring. So this would be a great way to do a whole pile of Christmas cards nice and easily and feel very arty. I think I had a plan last year to do my Christmas cards with this stamp, and that didn't happen. Maybe this year, with everything, with it being such a strange year, maybe Christmas cards will actually get made. It would be lovely actually, because I've found the last couple of years, as well as having trouble finding time myself to make Christmas cards, I find I'm receiving less as well. Maybe this year, because we haven't had much contact with friends, we'll all reach out at Christmas time and send those cards and send our Christmas letters and make the most of that chance of touching base with all of our friends. Now this one again is an underneath leaf, but I'm just going to imagine that this bit's still going to be getting a bit of light. So let's just darken off the lower edge of it. I keep going to call them petals. So used to colouring flowers, aren't we? Now this is an interesting one. So the light source is here. So this is going to be our lightest bit. So our darkest edge is going to be along here. Clean my brush. And just do a little bit of shading. Okay. Now I want to add, because we've got our light source from here, I want to add a bit of shadow around this side. So this time I'm going to have 2 water brushes on the go. We've got our slightly, no, actually I'm going to change. I've got my medium one on the go there. Instead of the fine, I'm going to switch to a bigger background brush. I'll just find that one. Where have I put it? And of course all I'm seeing is fine ones. There it is, hiding in the back. Okay, now we've got our filbert one, so this is the one that's got a wide, slightly rounded tip to it. Sorry, Matthew, I'm diving all over the place on you, aren't I? Thought I was so organised for this class, and then I forget a brush. So I'm just giving it a bit of squeeze, just getting a bit of water running through it. Okay, so now I can pick up a little bit of colour. And looking at my light source being here, so my colour's going to go along the edge there, and then I'm going to use the bigger brush to actually just feed some water into it and just smoosh that out a little bit. I don't want it competing with the actual gum leaves that we've coloured in. So we smoosh some water into it. Now in there, I think it's in danger of competing, so I'm just going to pull a bit out of there. So we do need some more shading around this side. So I'm going up next to our leaves, but then with the water, I lay the water down next to that and then sort of smoosh into it. Let that blend out a little bit. So this is quite a rough shadow. And it works in well that we've got some light patches of card up there. Okay, so that should help create that feeling that the light's here going to a slightly darker shade down there. Now we're going to add in some of our Wattle stamping. I'm just going to, this is still buckled a little bit on me, so I'm just going to wipe my hand along it a bit and just flatten that down a little bit. Okay, now our Wattle stamp is waiting to be loaded onto a block. So I'll just lift off the gum leaf wreath, put that to be cleaned, and put the Wattle stamp on. Now the Wattle stamp is made with lots of little fronds. I'll show you on the packet. Lots of little fronds that are all different shapes. This stamp design actually happened when someone requested a Wattle stamp, and I took a walk around our property and found about 5 different varieties of wattle within a couple of kilometres. So I thought, well, which wattle am I going to use? So I put them all together, photographed them all and popped them all together. And this way we actually get a really good variety of fronds that we can use as a border. So something that was just not quite a mistake, but not a planned event, turned out to make a really good stamp. So we get these great little fronds. Now I do have to be careful with my Catherine Pooler inks that I don't get them onto the acrylic block. So again, just remember just to tap gently. Now the heavier part of the pattern I might use on this shadowed part of the card. So again, we go from sort of lighter to stronger designs. So let's stick with more of the lighter fronds around these top edges. And I've done it again with the card. I'm just going to wipe that off on my sponge. So just be careful that you don't leave ink on your block, because that can come out onto the card. And it's very disappointing when you get to this point in your card if you then smoosh on colours that you don't want there. Let's just add a little bit more fine stuff down the side here. And then I'm going to go to the heavier part of the pattern again for the bottom corners. Oh, that's really cool. Now I'm going to give the whole card a swipe around the edge. You know what I think would look really good now? I could be about to mess with this whole card. I'm going to pick up a little bit of ink and do some shading around the edge. Just the swipe wasn't enough for me. I'm going to actually add in some extra shading. I think I want to deepen off around the wreath a little bit more. So I'm going to actually do that with my shading brush. So this is a number 10 size Future round brush. If you just ink the very top of it, you can then find that the side bristles help you with your blending. Don't ink it and get ink all over those bits, just stick to inking the top. I very rarely wash these brushes. I tend to have a brush for each colour family. So I don't have one for every shade of green, but I have one for light greens and one for dark greens. I just find they're so versatile for all your shading and colour blending. But now we're going to get a bit sneaky, and I'm going to just shade in. I should actually stop and make a mask for this, but because I'm already halfway through a tutorial, I'm not going to do that. So we're just going to see how we go. Just gently shading with a brush. So you might have noticed I didn't re-ink before I started doing this. I'm tempted to go around the whole lot, but that's our light side. Oh, I'm going to come a little bit further round, but without re-inking the brush. Just come a little bit up the side there, and then stop. Okay. Let's put our lid on our ink pad before I get tempted to do any more. So that's almost done. But what I still want to do, I want those leaves to jump out more. So I'm going to come in with some glossy accents. I'll just give that a little bit of a wipe. I've got a bit of paper towel. A bit of a wipe from the previous time I used it, and also make sure that it's running with no air bubbles. And I'm going to go around and add some to all of our leaves. And this is going to make them really stand out. Now that we've done all that shading in the background, it's going to be a bit tricky for Matthew to pick it up on the camera. I'll try and show him in a moment, but I'm seeing, because we mixed that little bit of Perfect Pearls in with our inks before we did our base smooshing, I'm actually seeing lovely metallic sheen over the background of the card, which is really nice. Now, last bit's going to be just because it's little sprigs of like wattle or wildflowers between our gum leaves. I'm going to come in with some liquid pearls and actually pick up on those as well. Last couple of leaves. And I've already chosen to use a fairly bright yellow, one of the new sunflower, or am I better going with a soft one? Lemon chiffon. Well, I'm looking at the background colours and just looking at which of these is going to go best. I think I'll stick with the sunflower, just because I do want something that's going to stand out a bit. So we're just going to add in just where there's little dots on the card, on the stamp design, just add in some extra little dots there. So you can actually go right over the stamp pattern, or you could do your dots sort of in between the stamp design. If there isn't any there, we could just add a few more. Taking care not to knock your glossy accents at all. That's going to be a good one that arcs around like that. A bit there, last little bit. Okay, that is coming up so nice. Right, I'm going to move it forward onto the black so Matthew can get a good shot of it with the camera, a nice close up, and hopefully pick up on all that lovely shine in the background, the glossy accents shining, and the beautiful pearls. Is that catching the shine, Matty?
Yeah.
Thank you for watching. I am loving this card and loving the fact that we could be creating several of them in a, like as I said, for doing our Christmas cards, we could create a whole batch of them. So those colours work so nicely together. Thank you very much for watching our gum leaf wreath in metallics, and we'll hopefully see you soon for another exploring Christmas designs. Thank you.